My name is Julie Pearson Little Thunder. Today is October 31st, 2010. I'm interviewing my husband Merlin Little Thunder as part of the Oklahoma Native Artist Project, sponsored by the Oklahoma Oral Histories Research Program at OSU. We're sitting in our Tulsa home. Merlin, you're a member of the Cheyenne Arapaho tribe of Oklahoma, especially known for your miniature work. Can you tell me a bit about your background, about your folks, where you were born?
I was born in Clinton, Oklahoma, at Clinton Indian Hospital. During that time that nearly all the CNA children were born at Clinton Indian Hospital. And I grew up west of Canton and along the North Canadian River, west of Canton Lake area, and close to an area that they call Fonda. It's a small town, small trading post area that thrived for a time, and then just like a lot of other small towns, shut down.
I know your grandmother was an important influence in your life. Can you talk a bit about her and your folks and perhaps your great-grandfather?
At the time frame in history, a lot of things were not practiced that were generally practiced, like the grandmother was usually responsible for raising the children. The grandmother would raise the children until they were around 8 or 9 years old, and then they would go back to their folks and be raised by their folks. The reason for that was that they had great respect for their grandmother. The grandmother never had to really have any disciplinary problems with those children. She would just give them a light shake on the shoulder and they would stop. They would behave. And she was the disciplinarian, and she taught them. She taught them during that age time. She taught them, and the parents didn't have to be the disciplinarian. So whenever it was time for them to go back to their parents and live with their parents at a doing some kind of dance of some kind, the grandmother would point to people sitting in the distance, and she would tell them, "There's your mother and father right there. Go to them. Go to them." And these children would have this Peter Pan-like effect, and they would go run to their parents, and it would be really brand new, be new. So in essence, the grandmother would have already done the groundwork for the parents. From that point on, they stayed with their mother and father, and their father and mother resumed raising them. And that's essentially how we were done. We were mostly kind of raised with our grandmother. Our grandmother took care of our early formative years, and she brought us along. She taught us, she spoke to us, she told us stories at nighttime. There were times when we couldn't sleep, and she would tell us stories. Sometimes she used to illustrate on the wall through the camp light. She would illustrate with hand shadows on the wall. And she'd say, "It looks like this, it looks like that." Anyway, she done her best to try to bring us up traditionally. Then they had a meeting over there. Some of the headsmen and some of the principal men had a meeting. And the meeting that was the concern was that the land management people were continuing to bring papers before these people, and these people would read them, and they would sign. They wouldn't read them actually because they couldn't read. These people would look at them, and the land management people would explain what was on that paper. Then they would sign it. They would sign it. A lot of them with just a thumbprint. They would sign it, put their mark on that paper, and off they would go. And then they would lose something. And these chiefs and these headsmen and these principal people started saying, every time they come around with a paper for us to sign, we lose something. We're going to have some of our children go to school and learn these ways so they can read us what's on that paper. so we won't continue to lose our land or lose our rights or lose something. So they had a meeting and they said, some of you children are already going to school and some of you children are not. We're going to decide who's going to all go to school. So they sent these people out to the community, these headsmen and these principal people, and they came to our house and they said, George, your kids are already in school, so continue to let them go to school. And from that point on, the battle cry was set, go to school, learn all you can, ask questions, participate. So that's what we did in essence. And then from that point on, we stopped talking Cheyenne. They wouldn't talk Cheyenne to us anymore after that. We talked English from then on. And then we got tired of we got tired of the scenario where we come home from school and my grandmother and father was in the living room. They were talking Cheyenne, and they'd stop when we came in and look at us, and then he would tell her to go to her house. We'll continue the conversation there. So we'd leave and go to her house, and then we'd continue their conversation there. So we kind of grew wary of that, and we told him, we said, we want to talk Cheyenne again. We want to learn Cheyenne. So there was a principal man who was the arrow keeper. His name was Joe Antelope. He said, Joe's coming over here this weekend. He's coming over here. Ask him. You ask him. If he says all right, then all right. So there was a meeting. It was a birthday meeting over there across the river, and Joe came. He came and he said, there he is over there. Go ask him. And we didn't want to go ask him. So he said, come on, let's go. So he led us over there and he said, Joe, these boys want to ask you a question. He said, okay, yeah, what you want? And he said, we want to learn how to talk Cheyenne again. We want to teach us to talk Cheyenne. Then he stopped and looked at us and he kind of pondered for a little bit and he said, no. He said, you won't need it anymore. And that was it. We stopped talking Cheyenne after that.
What schools did you attend then in the area through high school?
First, everybody went to Lawndale. We went to Lawndale Elementary School, and it was only what they call today is a middle school. But then back then they said it was a grade school, Lawndale Elementary School, grade school. We went to school there. That's where we started going to school. And as time progressed, my father had a GI Bill, and he told us I can go to school on this GI Bill. I can go to school. He said, I think I'm going to go to Okmulgee. I'm going to go to Okmulgee Tech, and I want to go to school over there. He asked all of us, what do you think about going to Okmulgee Tech? We want to go to school. He said, I'll take you away from here. You're going to learn new things, see different people, and see different parts of the country. He said, we'll come back. We'll continue to come back. It was something that was kind of ingrained. My grandmother would require him to come back for our annual ceremony. She wouldn't allow him to miss it. We used to always go to our annual ceremony every year. She made sure that we went. It was very important that we attended it. And so we went to it, and that was one of the stipulations that he go off to school, and then he come back every summer for the ceremony. We had to move up there. We had to literally move everything up there, so we didn't have the money to go back and forth. We had to just stay up there, and we came home Christmas. Sometimes we didn't come home Thanksgiving. We had to choose Christmas or Thanksgiving, and then we came home summertime for the ceremony. But from there, we went to, when he attended Okmulgee, we went to Okmulgee schools. I went to Lee School. I don't know I don't know if it's Robert E. Lee or it was just called Lee School. And my brother Jimmy went to Franklin. I don't know if it's Ben Franklin or Franklin. We just knew schools by their last name, so to speak. I went to Lee and he went to Franklin. And then we moved back after my father finished. First he went to auto body, and all the hammering and working on metal was too hard on his hearing, his ears. he got earaches. So he told my mother, he said, I'm going to switch. I'm going to switch. I already talked to the people in the office. I'm going to switch. I'm going to go to offset printing. So he went to offset printing, and he finished offset printing. And from there, we moved back to Canton. And he went around all over looking for jobs around El Reno, Oklahoma City. He found one briefly in Oklahoma City, but we didn't want to live in Oklahoma City. So he continued to look, and then he found one in Enid, Oklahoma. An elderly man, his name was Otis Phillips. The company's name was Otis Phillips House of Fine Printing. And this man, he didn't have any children. He didn't have any children. He liked my father. My father worked real diligently, and he used to clean up. He used to sweep whenever when he got through with his shift. And an old man would come in there and say, George, you don't need to sweep. You don't need to do that. You don't need to sweep. So we've got people that come in and sweep at night. So I said, oh, okay. And he just continued to sweep and sweep. And it's the same scenario every evening. He would say, George, you don't have to sweep. You don't sweep. And father would say, oh, okay, okay. But continue to sweep. Finish up. Anyway, over there, we went to school over there. We went to two different schools. First, we went to Adams Elementary School, which was by Phillips University. And then we moved across town. And when we moved across town, we went to another school called Harrison Elementary School. And then I think the pool of the Cheyenne ways was hard on my parents, because we continued to go back to Canton every single weekend in the Fonda and Sealand area. That pool was real strong. He couldn't really practice his ceremonial ways while we were in Enid. It was really alien to us. It was different. Everything was different over there. So we ended up moving back to Canton again. He quit his job at Otis Phillips. And Otis Phillips, since he didn't have no children, he wanted to leave the printing shop to my father. As an heir, he wanted to do that. My father just didn't see it. He just didn't have it in him. He just couldn't do it or something. So we moved back to Canton. And resumed school at Lawndale again. And after Lawndale, it only goes to the 8th grade. We went to Canton High School. That's where we both graduated.
When did you first get interested in art? Do you remember what first aroused your interest as a child?
A lot of artists always say that they will say that certain elements in nature cause them to want to be an artist, and certain structures or certain landscapes or animals. But for me, it was different. It was totally different how it came to be. I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say my experience was more of a spiritual one. It was the spiritual element that caused me to become an artist. I was in bed one night sleeping, and this bright light came to me. It was a real bright light. It illuminated the whole room, but it wasn't physical light. It was like an inner light. It came to me, it hovered around, and it came to me. And when it got close to me, I got afraid. I was scared. I was real scared, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't talk. It just like overtook my senses. And I couldn't make a sound. Then for some reason, I was able to make a noise again. I jumped out of my bed and I ran to my folks and I said, there's something's in my room. It's a light. It's a big light. It's a bright light. Something's in my room. And I didn't want to go back in there. And they said, no, it was nothing. It was just a nightmare. Go back in there. Go back to bed. I wanted to sleep in there with them. And they said, no, come on, I'll take you back. So my mother took me back to my bed and said, see, look, there's nothing here. It's all right, go to sleep. So that experience continued for 4 times. 4 times it happened the same way. it seemed like on the fourth time, I wasn't that afraid. I wasn't that afraid of that light anymore. It was more, it was a lot of anxiety there, but it was, you know, it was not as intense as before. Shortly after that light came, I started drawing on everything. I drew and drew and drew. I drew on boxes. I drew on anything that had a smooth surface on it. I just drew. I just continued to drew and draw and draw and draw on everything I could get my hands on. Being at that young age and all these years, I never attribute it to that light source. It didn't dawn on me till years later that something came to me. Something came to me, something touched me. Something caused me to have that talent, because that's what I did. As soon as I experienced it, I drew and drew and drew. But then later years it came again. It used to come again, but not so intense, and there was not a lot of fear there.
What kinds of things were you drawing after when you started?
I was drawing everything I seen. I would draw trees. I would draw cars. I would draw dogs, cats. I drew telephone posts. I was already establishing the connection between perspective, mass, distance, and I was already looking at how telephone posts used to differ with birds sitting on them, and they used to have these insulators on them, on these telephone posts, these big insulators, or glass insulators. And those glass insulators used to look like birds. And I continued to look at those posts, and I seen those insulators. And then pretty soon I started counting. I said, hey, wait a minute, there's 2 more insulators on there. And they were actually birds. So, you know, I was distinguishing all those fine points. And I was mimicking everything I could. I was watching how the grasses bent. I was watching how the leaves shaped, and how the wind blew them and caused them to shape differently. I was noticing everything. Everything was so strong and so intense. I was watching it, and I was recording it. And then back then the dictionary had all these illustrations inside them. That these amazing little highly detailed illustrations, and so I would copy from the dictionary. I would try to do it exact. I would duplicate them exactly like they were without tracing them. One of my classmates saw me doing that and say, why don't you do it like this? It's easier. She brought tracing paper over there and traced it. I said, no, that's cheating. That's cheating. You want to do it on your own. You want to try to do it on your own. Do it on your own as close as you can get it.
I know your Uncle Raymond was also an influence on you, wasn't he? Were there some other mentors or family members who sort of influenced your decision to keep working at art?
Well, Raymond was a talented artist. He was really, really super gifted. You could only look at once and then replicate it. Person, trees, rivers, anything, you just look at it once and you could replicate it. Make it look exactly like that. And he was a very talented artist. He never did sell any, I think he might have sold some paintings, but he never developed a career on it. He just, whenever necessity deemed, he would sell a painting or two or trade it. But you know, he was very talented, very gifted, and I spent a lot of time with Raymond. We traveled down to the riverbank, and we would walk, and he would look at things. He would stare at things for a long time. I said, what are you staring at? He said, look over there, look at that water over there. Look on the bottom where the reflection is. Look at the bottom there. See it? It's dancing on the water. I said, uh-huh. He said, look at the top of the reflection and the bottom of the reflection. Which one is brighter? And I told him the bottom is brighter. He said, yeah, that's right, it is brighter. It was brighter because it was in full sunlight, and it was shining on it, so that's what made it brighter. But then he walked down the river another place, and he was looking in the water again. He said, look over here now, that's the same tree over there, and it's the same reflection. Which one's brighter? And he said, this one on the top's brighter than the one in and the river is dimmer. And it's right. So he was looking at a lot of color. He was making the distinctions between color and nature. He was showing everything. He would say, look at the green and look at that green tree, or look how green it is. Look at that sky behind it. Look how blue it is. And he would say they're the same. Blue and green are the same. I didn't know what he was talking about. I was just, just kind of intrigued that he was making all these distinctions toward nature. I thought he was looking at birds. When we were looking in the river, and I was looking at the reflection of this tree in the river, I seen fishes swimming around and way in the bottom. I seen them way in the bottom. They were catfishes. They were browsing on the bottom there. And then when he said, "Look over there. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that limb. It's making it a dancing reflection of water." I was looking at. I wasn't actually looking at the limb or the water. I seen a frog over there. I seen a frog, and then I seen a bird. So I had a real acute vision. I could really see a lot of little things. I seen a dragonfly. I was counting off what was actually the creatures I was seeing instead of really actually paying attention to the dancing water.
He was kind of showing you some things to look for, though, wasn't he, in terms of artistic technique already?
Yeah.
When you were in high school, you were already making money on your art. You even had commissions. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I was always constantly drawing in high school. I was constantly drawing on notebooks and on papers. Then I would illustrate all of my homework. I would illustrate it, actually illustrate it. And some of these teachers would send it back to me and say, "Do not draw on your homework." And another teacher gave me extra credit. She gave me extra credit for those illustrations on the homework. And I continued to draw and draw and draw. And in art class, I had the same art teacher from Lawndale to Canton. The same art teacher all the way through. And this art teacher was more like an old school art teacher. This art teacher taught he taught us only to use the primaries, so that's what I used. So when I went to Canton, he was my art teacher at Canton, and he put me in charge of the art class. So we was always constantly drawing. I was drawing quite a bit in art class. I was working out of subject matter because they were working on leathercraft, and I was still painting. Or they would be working on silk screen, and I would be painting. Or they would be working on charcoal, and I would be painting. I would be content. He said, "Why do you get to paint when we have to work on charcoal?" I said, "Because I'm in charge here. He put me in charge now. Be quiet and draw." So anyway, after that, I was drawing on notebooks, and I had independent sketchbooks where I was drawing on. And a lot of these kids used to really like that. They said, "I don't really like that," so I'd tear it out and give it to them. I did that for a couple of years. I'd tear it out and give it to them. And then pretty soon they started competing for it. They said, "Well, I'll give you $2 for it, or I'll give you $3 for it." And so I'd say, "Okay, all right." Pretty soon they weren't free anymore. They were not free anymore. And our high school logo was a tiger, so I did a lot of tigers. And I did it for me creatively as the creative process, but the people were looking over my shoulders and they'd say, they were betting on it. They would say, "I'll give you $4 for it." And I said, "No, I'll give you $5. I'll give you $5. If you make my number, the number of my jersey on this tiger right here, I'll give you $7. I said, "All right." So I was making money in high school, selling these little drawings and sketches and prints and stuff. And I got pretty proficient in painting. I started painting more and more. I started painting different scenes. People used to bring me, they would bring canvases and oil paints and acrylic paints, brushes. They would constantly bring them to our house. Farmers' wives and various townspeople, they would say, "Your son is an artist." And I had a relative who passed away and who's also an artist. So, and they had all this art equipment. I don't really know what to do with it, and I hate to throw it away. I know I can't sell it, so I like to give it to you. So, people were constantly giving us art equipment, art supplies. And I utilized them. I used them, and I paint on them. And then this woman who worked in a print shop. It was actually the newspaper shop. It was, had an in-house printing press in there. And she said, "Why don't you bring some of your paintings and put them in a window over here?" So I did that a couple of times, and I wasn't very successful at it because I didn't market it very well. I didn't make it attractive. I didn't put a nice frame on it. I didn't put a mat on it. I just bought a frame from TG&Y. It was the equivalent of Target store, because it had everything in it. I bought a frame from TG&Y, and I just put a frame on it and put a glass on it and put it in a window. I never sold it because it was very attractive, and I distinguished that early on. I knew that marketing was real important. So at school, I would take some of those pictures, and I would actually cut mats. I would cut a mat with the X-Acto knife, and I was just using a poster board for mats, but I would double up on them, and I would reinforce them and make them strong, and they sold. They would sell. So I was, at an early age, I was learning the marketing techniques and marketing skills, knowing that people will buy something if it's attractive, if it's properly displayed. That it's really important how you present things to people. I learned that at an early age. So anyway, after that, I started getting photographs from townspeople. They said, "Look at this ship! Isn't this a beautiful ship? It's in this harbor, and look at the mist behind it, and the sun. Look at the sun, and the sun is actually pink. Look at this in this painting." So I take it home and I'll replicate it on an oil painting. I was replicating from photographs way back then. I was doing photographs, and I would take them to these farmers' wives, and they would buy them. They would buy them for $40, sometimes $65, and that was a lot of money for a high school kid. So I continued to paint in high school and sell to these farmers' wives. Some of these merchants would buy them. The merchants of the townspeople would buy them. So I was constantly selling in high school.
How did you use that money? Did you use some of it when you went to Southwestern?
No, I didn't use it. I just spent all of it up. I was just recreating.
You went to Southwestern in what year approximately?
1975.
Did you go with the intention of pursuing art?
No, I went over there to run track. I went to run track. And Clarence Tom Coach Thomas was instrumental in getting me up there. He wanted me to run track. But then on the other hand, there was another coach who came to our high school to recruit me. His name was Glenn Stone. He was from Eastern Oklahoma State College. I don't even remember him. And here our high school superintendent said, "Stone really wanted you. He recruited you real heavily." And I told him, "I don't remember meeting him."
But you had won some. You were very much interested in athletics, and you had won a couple of titles in high school. Is that right?
Yeah, we were taught to be competitive from an early age. I was real fast, really fast. We used to have these doings. One of our arrow keepers would have a meeting, and they would invite all the people. All the people would come, and they would eat, and they would have races. We would have little contests, and then in my age group, I would beat all the kids in my age group. So they moved me up to the next age group, and I beat those guys. They had a system by where they would say, "Okay, everybody this high in this group right here. Okay, everybody this high." So I was beating everybody in this high, which was my age group. Then they moved me up to that age group, and I beat them guys. And then finally, the older guys, I would beat them. And they got mad. They would chase me around, and they would try to hit me. And they said, "Quit beating us. Quit beating us." And I'd say, "Okay." And I would beat them again. And then these older men came over there, because they were laughing at those boys. They said, "That little guy's beating you guys, isn't he? He's really beating you guys." Who were laughing at him. So those older men came to me and they said, "You better quit beating those guys. They're going to beat you up." I said, "Okay, I'll quit beating them." So I let them win. And that didn't leave a very good taste in my mouth, even at young age, it really left a bad taste in my mouth. I went and told those old men, I said, I thought you told us to try our best. I thought you told us to do our best. And said, yeah, you should do your best. I said, oh, okay, so I won't beat them again. So they used to chase me around all the time because I beat them. Anyway, I excelled I excelled in athletics because that's what we were told to do. We were told to be very, very competitive. Very competitive. They said the best way you can be good is that don't compete against other people. Compete against yourself. And didn't understand that for a long time. My brother and I were very athletic, and we competed with one another. So in school, naturally, we became competitors. We played football and basketball and ran track.
So you didn't take any art classes at Southwestern?
Yeah, I did. I took some art classes there, but mostly just drawing classes.
And how did you get from Southwestern to Bacone?
Well, Southwestern was just a too big environment for me to be in. I needed to be in a smaller environment. So we had a lot of trouble in Southwestern. I had a lot of problems, a lot of trouble there. And then I went ahead and withdrew. And then the superintendent of schools, who was Jim Bradford, he said, you think you need to go to Bacone. You need a smaller environment. You need somebody one-on-one with teachers, etc. And he said, it's a great school. So I went ahead and took his advice, and I went to Bacone. I went over there because I thought Bacone had a track program also, and I was going to run track for Bacone. But they turned out they didn't have no track program.
Do you know approximately what year that was?
That was 1970. That was the spring of, I think that was 1976, the fall of 1976.
Were there any well-known Indian artists teaching at Bacone at that time?
No, Dick West had just left. He just exited. I think he went to high school. So my art instructor was Gary Colbert.
Did he advocate a particular approach to art or paint a particular style?
No, not really. His approach was just to go upstairs and paint. Just go paint, that's all. Or go downstairs.
I know that there were a lot of students from the Southwest, some Zunis and Navajos and Apaches that were in the art program, I guess. What did your experiences with them? How did they inform your work?
Well, my roommate was he was a Navajo. He was from Flagstaff, Arizona, and he could speak his language really well, and he was really into Native American church, but he never really painted it. He never really painted Native American church. He spoke a lot of Navajo, and then our styles were different. My style was more based on a realistic approach, and his style was more kind of in between flat two-dimensional and realism, so it was really hard to characterize what style he was. So we became friends. We became friends, and then his friends would come to our room, and they would talk Navajo. They would talk their language. I would sit there and I would listen. I just listened to their tones, the tones of their language, and then I kept looking at these two other guys. They were quite different than the main group, and I finally approached him and said, "Hey, wait a minute." He said, "Yeah, what, Pastor?" I said, "Well, how come you talk Navajo?" He said, "Our languages are similar. So there's a few words that are different." So that was interesting to hear them. Anyway, we kind of done a cultural exchange. Ray Joe would ask me about my tribe and my beliefs, and then he would tell me his. He would tell me his beliefs and his tribe and legends and lores, etc. And then he would say, "Paint the Navajo painting, and I'll critique it." And he said, "I'm going to paint a Plains Indian scene, and you critique it. Tell me what I did wrong." So we'd do that. We'd critique it.
How did you end up at Eastern Oklahoma State College in Wilburton, Oklahoma?
Well, I really wanted to run track. I did continue to run and train at Bacone. I used to get up every morning and I would run. I ran 3, 4, 5 miles every morning. And then I would run in the afternoon, sometimes in the evening. I did that for a while. And I noticed I was cutting down a lot on that. And I think the pull was pretty strong. And I wasn't really doing anything at Bacone. I wasn't really achieving anything. I wasn't going to the places I wanted to go because I wasn't there as an art student. Anyway, I finally did go to Eastern Oklahoma State College. After a brief intermission there, I went to Eastern. I went to Eastern and I was introduced to Coach Stone. He said, "I wanted you out right out of high school." He said, "I wanted you right out of high school." And he said, "We'll start you in. We'll start you with your track program." So we started the track program. And that's where it all began, right there. And I kind of realized that I was out too long. I was out too long to really have that kind of edge, because I didn't continue over there in the track program. I only went a certain way, certain distance. I didn't go the whole distance.
And then, of course, you had lost your parents too.
Yeah, I lost my mother and father. So that wasn't really took a lot out. Took a lot of drive, a lot of passion. Kind of left you. I don't know how to explain it. Just kind of left you listless, so to speak.
You did meet someone and got married and moved to Arkansas for a while, where you worked in a factory. What did you do there?
I worked on a paint line for the Ream and Rudd air conditioning units. All we did was just take these painted parts off the line and put them in baskets or stack them up. It was just a pretty mundane job, just a factory job. It wasn't any fun. But I kept journals of sketchbooks, and I continued to draw and sketch.
How did you end up in Tulsa?
Well, the marriage failed over there in Wilburton, and I just walked away from it after the divorce. After the divorce happened, I just walked away. Went to Tulsa. A lot of people were saying you should go to Tulsa. They were saying, "You're really talented. You're wasting your talent over here. You're wasting it." I was painting signs, being a sign painter. I was selling paintings to people there, here and there. I wasn't really doing anything with it. Anyway, they used to encourage me I should go to Tulsa, so I went to Tulsa.
I know that you had a rough time at first, living on the street until you hooked up with Jim Hewlett. Do you want to tell us how you met Jim and what he did and how he helped you out in your career?
Well, at my wit's end, I finally decided to go to Tulsa from Wilburton, and I just went literally with the clothes on my back. And this preacher was going to Henrietta. He was going to Oklahoma City. He's going to go through Henrietta. He said, "I'll give you a ride to Henrietta." So he gave me a ride to Henrietta. And he said, "I'm going to buy you lunch over here, and then you continue on this road, and you'll get to Tulsa." And he said, "You got to get a ride between here and there." So I continued. So when I had lunch, he said, "The next time I see you, you'll be so dang rich, you'll be buying me lunch." So, "Oh, okay." So I continued on, went to Tulsa. I didn't have a clue what to do. No clue what to do. Anyway, I continued to just wander around in Tulsa, and these street guys, they said, He said, hey, this guy over here, his name is Jim Hewlett, collects Indian art. You should go over there and you should show him your drawings. When I got to Tulsa, there was this printing company that I didn't really know it was a printing company, but I was taking a shortcut through the alley, and I seen this dumpster, and it was just overflowing with paper of all descriptions and sizes. I guess these guys were throwing out their stock that was no longer available. So I took a bunch of that paper. I took it and I put it under my arm, and I was walking downtown to the big buildings, and I found pencils on the ground along the way. And I went to the ice rink over there. It was called Williams Center Forum. I went down there. I started drawing pictures. Sitting there, I had all this paper, and I was drawing pictures. And all of a sudden, all of these people started coming out of nowhere. They were dressed up like came from church. I had these suits on. And it was the Williams Company's employees. They came down for lunch. On the bottom of the ice rink was a restaurant. They would go eat lunch there. So during the lunch process, I continued to draw pictures there, and people would walk behind me. Where are you seeing that? Are you just drawing that from memory? And I said, yeah. And they said, wow, that's really nice. And then pretty soon someone would say, how much you want for that? I said, oh, I don't know. And they said, well, after work, we'll come back down here and see how you are, see how far along you are. And if you want to sell it, we'll buy it from you. So the security guard was kind of watching me too. And he was part Cherokee. And he said, man, that's really good. That's really nice, man. And he started telling me about all the artists he knew. And he said, are you going to sell it? And I said, I don't even know how to price. I never sold this kind of work before. And he said, well, he started looking through there. And then he looked at one of them. He said, how about this one? He said, I really like this one. He said, how much you want for this one? I said, oh, I don't know. I'll let you have $10. And he said, are you kidding me? No, I'll let you have $10. He started digging through his pocket, and he said, I only have $8. Wait a minute, let me see. He started digging through this, so he got change. So he gave me $8 in change for that pencil drawing.
Was it a portrait of an Indian face, or?
No, it was horses. It was horses. Indians on horses. It was a big old cedar tree. They were all standing around the cedar tree, and they were all on horseback. And one of them looked like he was looking on the ground. So I think that's what this security guard was attracted to, so he bought it. Anyway, I continued to draw, and then those people did come down from their quitting time. They all came down, and they asked how much this, how much that. I was selling for like $25. So next thing you know, I had like $70, and I was really amazed. Anyway, these street chiefs, they said, this guy named Jim Hewlett, he collects Indian art. He said, our friend Troy was going to make a deal with him. He was going to give Troy a space to paint, and he was going to pay him. He was going to buy his paintings from him, and he's going to trade him the space to paint, give him a studio space. He said, but Troy messed up and he went to prison, so he's not going to do it. He said, I bet you he'll do that with you. So go in there and show him. And his place was really, it was really not very, very attractive. It was really desolate looking place, and it was really harsh environment. And I thought, this guy's not going to buy art. So I did. Later on, a week later, after they told me, I took a number of drawings and I showed it to this man, and then he looked at it and he said, yeah. He said, well, actually, I don't really collect Native American art. I collect Oriental art. He said, but Oriental art and Native American art for me is really, really close. So I like Native American art. So he said, let me take this inside the office and see what they think. And he took it in there, and I thought, oh man, that's it. I was just thinking about who I was going to go visit. So he brought it back, and he said, you know what, you're a winner, man. They love your work. He told me about the deal he was going to make with Troy, and he said, come back here, look at this space here. He said, there was another Indian artist. I was going to give him the space to paint, and I was going to buy paintings from him, and I was going to trade him this space for paintings. He said, you think you'd be interested in the same deal? I said, yeah, sure, I'd be interested in it. He said, okay, let me buy a number of these drawings from you. And he said, you paint, don't you? And I said, yeah, I paint. He said, well, you can go get you some supplies. You can get some paints and stuff. He said, what else you need? Whatever you need, let me know. I'll see what I can do to get it for you. So I didn't need any lights or equipment because I could still see really, really good, under regular 100-watt light bulb. So I painted there for a number of years, and Jim Hewlett continued to buy paintings for me. Continued to buy them and trade me paintings for the space there. And we had a relationship for a while. And I didn't have any driver's license. And he had a labor hall. And this guy up and quit on him, who was a van driver. He said, I need a van driver. He said, can you go pick up these men over here? I said, I don't have any driver's license. He said, that's all right. I just need them picked up. They have to get here. Nobody's here. So I said, okay, I'll go get them. So I get on the van and I take off, and I went to get them. And they showed me how to get back. I said, how do you get back to Tulsa? I don't even know my way around here. I said, go down this way, go down that way. And they would say, turn here, exit over here. And they showed me how to get down, got them back safely. And I thought that was the end of that. So I got back there, and then he said, thank you so much. So I don't know what I was going to do. He said, I'll try to get another van driver. But he didn't really get another van driver because they were hard to come by. Those that were really reliable, some of them were not very reliable. So I continued to drive the van for him as he needed, and he would pay me for it. And I didn't have any license. I didn't have no driver's license.
You were also selling a bit to galleries then, weren't you? What were some of the galleries that you were dealing with?
I walked up to the art market, which was on 51st and Memorial. They told me about that art market, that gallery there. Somebody said, you should go to, there's an Indian art market, Indian art gallery here in town. It's a really nice gallery. You should go over there. I bet they'll deal your work for you. So I said, okay, I'll go over there. And so where's it at? He said, it's 51st and Memorial. So I asked Jim, I said, Jim, where's 51st and Memorial? He said, oh man, he said, it's over there by where I live, close to where I live. He lived at the Falls Apartments. It was on 61st and I think it was on 61st and Yale, I think, or Sheridan Memorial, somewhere around there. Anyway, he said, yeah, it was 61st Memorial. He said, it's close to where I live. He said, it's way out there. He said, I can get a van and let them take you out there if you want. I said, no, that's all right, I'll walk. He said, what, you're going to walk out there? I said, yeah, I'll walk. He said, no, you better let me get a van to take you out there. And I said, no, that's all right, I'll walk. So I walked out there with a painting under my arm, and I told him, I thought to myself, yeah, I should have let him send me a van out here. Because it was a long, long way. It was like 10 miles or 8 miles, something like that. Anyway, I went over there. I took the painting, and I told the gallery lady, I said, my name's Merlin Little Thunder. I'm a traditional Indian artist. And I had a painting that was matted. It was on mat board because usually back then those artists, Indian artists, used to paint on mat board. So I showed it to her, and she said, "Oh, that's really nice. I really like this." And then at that time, her resident artist was Ben Harjo, and she showed it to Benjamin Harjo, and he said, "What do you think?" She said, "Yeah, that's nice." He said, she asked him, "Should I buy it?" He said, "Do you want it?" So she bought it. I didn't know how to price it. I said, "I don't know how. What will you give me for it?" And she said, You have to price it. You have to name it." I said, I don't know. I never sold a painting this big before. So I told her $85. She said, 85, okay. And she said, 85 wholesale or retail? And I said, I don't know. I don't know what that is. She said, well, if you say, she explained to me the process, wholesale and retail. So I told her wholesale, I guess. So she gave me $40-something. And then she said, I'm having a show in a couple 3 weeks or so. She said, would you like to be in it? And I said, I don't know. I have to think about it. And she said, do you have any more paintings? And I said, yeah, I have some more paintings. And Ben Harjo said, of this quality? And I said, uh-huh. She said, well, that's all right. You can put them in the show. So that became the relationship between me and the art market. It was the first gallery I was able to get in.
Was this 1982 or?
I think it was 1981. Or, yeah, it might have been 81.
Were you able to come up with a couple of paintings for the show?
I came up with a few paintings. I met all the Indian artists there and was able to show a few paintings over there.
Was it your first experience sort of mingling with people who were there just to buy Indian art? What was it like?
Well, it was a big crowd, and it was a real brisk activity. People were actually buying. They were in there buying. They were buying, they were meeting the artists, and they were talking to them. I seen them in little groups here and there. They were meeting their favorite artists, and they were getting them to sign things for them, and they were talking to them about their work. And then Ben Harjo would round up people, and they said, "This is a new artist. His name is Merlin Little Thunder, and this is his work over there." He said, "Go show him your work." So I go show him, and sit and discuss and talk a little bit. And then I met another artist there at the same time. His name was Randy Wood. And I befriended Randy, and we became friends. And he done the same thing. He'd say, "This is Merlin Thunder. He's a new artist. I want you to look at his work. You think that this guy's going to go really far. And where else are you showing that? Tell him where you're showing that. Where else?" I said, "This is the only place." But they were real aggressive at first.
We met, I think, around 1985, but you had, in addition to selling to galleries, you were selling quite a bit to individuals who had different businesses around town, and you had people who were actually selling for you a bit also. How did you know what individuals to visit with what paintings?
Well, mostly it was from word of mouth. People would say, "Go to so-and-so, they collect Indian art. Go over here and go over there." And I had some friends that I cultivated some friendships with some people, and I would send them out to sell art. They would come to I was living in the YMCA, and I was painting there. And they would come up there, and I would send them out with paintings. I'd say, "Take this one too," and I would name the name and address, and they would take it over there. And then they would come back, and they would say, "He wasn't there." So I would say, "Okay, take it over here then." I would send them another place. I would send them to various places, and they would bring back, I said, "Do the best you can to get cash. If they don't have no cash, then just bring the check back, I guess." So sometimes they would bring cash back, sometimes they would bring check back. So at the end of the day, I would pay them. I would pay them some money. I would give them a percentage of what they sold. Continued that relationship for a time, and it worked pretty well.
And was your subject matter, what kinds of things were you painting? Were you selling what kinds of pictures?
Well, I was selling mostly like warriors on horseback, and I had this starburst effect where I did this with series of templates, smaller moons, bigger moons, that sort of like that mimic an aura around a bright object, and I would use that as a background. And it was a lot of toothbrush spray. I didn't have no airbrush, and I was really interested in doing airbrush.
And that was pretty popular back then.
Yeah, that was pretty popular back then, toothbrush splatter. But I done it with a baby toothbrush, where I got the toothbrush and I frayed it on the cement like this. I frayed it till it was real super fine, and I had to control the effect by applying a light color on it. Then I would gently tap it, and it would give it the airbrush quality.
What do you think the difference was between the Indian art landscape of the 80s? Well, I guess if you can sort of describe what the 1980s Indian art landscape was like. What most people were doing in terms of style, etc., and how what you were doing was a little bit different.
Well, it was a real interesting style back then. I think the majority of it was still flat two-dimensional work. then with the addition of certain artists that came onto the scene, it became a departure away from flat two-dimensional into more of a individual style. People used to say you have to make a voice of your own. You have to have your own voice. Don't rely on these old Indian artists to carry your voice. You have to make your own voice. And then we didn't really know what that meant. We can continue to try to do flat two-dimensional work. And then we tried to evolve from that, try to evolve into a different style. Every time we tried to evolve to a different style, we always run against a wall where people would say, "This ain't Indian art. This ain't Indian art." And we had that trouble for a time. And it was just the end of the Philbrook annual show where they had their competition. It was the end of it. It was the end of that show, and they were designating Santa Fe as the Indian capital, the Indian focal point, so to speak, the universal center of Indian art. So Indian art in Oklahoma kind of fell off, and people started looking toward other progressive artists. You know, I think R.C. Gorman came on the scene, and they were saying that R.C. Gorman said to leave the flat two-dimensional work to those who brought it to glory and do your own thing. Do your own thing. So we continued on that. We started to try to do our own thing. And throughout the years, I used to paint landscapes. I did landscapes. I did a lot of landscapes. And to me, landscapes was the pull. It was the draw. I really enjoyed doing landscapes. Growing up along the riverbed, you know, we were down there all the time. We watched it change, watched the seasons change, come and go. And that was real strong for me. And I think that's why I was so drawn to landscapes. So, you know, I'd done landscapes, and I couldn't sell them because it was the Indian art. I would put Indians in there, right, horsebacks and, you know, teepees and everything, and people just were not buying them. Say, it's not Indian art. That's not Indian art. So I had to kind of sneak them in there a little at a time. I would put a bush in there or a tree and do it real sneaky like, and then pretty soon, next thing you know, they were buying landscapes. They were actually comfortable enough to buy them. Because I think the battle cry back then was that buy what you like. People were start saying things like don't buy art for investment purpose. Buy what you like.
So was it a new generation of collectors, sort of, that was?
Yeah, and I think that was the oil boom was probably, or the oil bust was partly to blame for that, because people would come into the gallery with disposable income and they would say, "I want that, and say, "Ship them to me." And they would write out either a check or a credit card, and they would leave, and that was it. They had a lot of play money. But then, as time changed, people didn't have that kind of income, and they wanted to know what they were buying. They wanted to know. They were asking questions, and their buying habits were differently. They didn't really have that much disposable income. They didn't have that much play money, so it was really different. The patrons were different because they wanted to know. Suddenly, all of a sudden, these paintings had to have a narrative. They wanted to know what they were buying.
Did this shift happen in the late 80s, or is this a shift between the 80s and the 90s?
I think it was a gradual shift. It's a gradual change between 83 and it really started gaining momentum around the 89, 90, 91, 92. People wanted to know what they were buying.
What kinds of shows and competitions were you entering at that time?
Well, we was entered Trail of Tears art show in Tahlequah, and I don't think Red Earth was even started yet. So mostly just Trail of Tears art show, and there was a few little art shows here and there that I went ahead and entered in. powwow shows, things like that. Mostly galleries, mostly Oklahoma Indian Art Gallery, and another gallery that opened up in here in Tulsa called the Western Heritage. Galleries started opening up, and one in Sapulpa called the Indian Territory Gallery. So I was dealing with those galleries.
And the owner of the Western Heritage Gallery was sort of an inspiration for you in terms of developing miniatures, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, he did. He did say some things about miniature painting. He said if you look around, all these galleries are full of large paintings, or full of bigger things, and you don't hardly see very many small paintings. You see some small paintings, but they're not what you would call fully realized paintings. They're just, small expressions. So it's not very many miniature painters around here. It's just a very few miniature painters. Even nationwide, it's not very many of them. So you could actually make a profession as a miniature painter. So I explored it. I was already doing smaller work, and he knew I was doing smaller work, and that's the only thing I could really do at the time was smaller work. I didn't have the time, the space, or the money to do larger paintings, so I was doing a lot of smaller works, really small, and people were attracted to them. I noticed how they were attracted to them. A lot of the people that we were selling to outside of the galleries were actually buying smaller paintings because they could afford them, and they could afford them space-wise and financially. So they were buying a lot of miniature paintings, and that's what Otis Wilson picked up on. He said, these miniatures will always sell. When these shows are happening and these big paintings are not moving, he said, miniatures going to sell.
I think Red Earth started in the late 80s, actually. But what was the importance of entering shows and competitions for you? Why were they important?
Well, back then, in that time frame, it was important to garner some first place ribbons, get recognized as some of the top artists who are able to win ribbons, win competitions. I think they started pinning artists as award-winning artists. So a lot of people seem to go by that. It carried a lot of weight for some collectors to say he won first place here, he won first place there.
In 1990, the Indian Arts and Crafts Act was passed, and in addition to protecting from knockoffs, say of Cherokee pottery that were actually made in China, the act also required artists who claimed a particular tribal affiliation to provide proof of enrollment or be certified by their tribe. Do you remember how this impacted some of the galleries and or individual artists?
Well, from the onset, when I first came to Tulsa, from that security guard over there at the Williams Center who bought this painting, he said he was a Cherokee, but to me he was Anglo. It was really it's really hard for me to distinguish between Indian and Anglo here in Tulsa, because a lot of people were more Anglo than they were recognizably as Indians, and they were saying, I'm Indian, I'm Native American, and that goes the same. That saying goes the same with the artists. A lot of them were Indian artists, but they have blonde hair and green eyes. To us, where we came from in western and northwest Oklahoma, Indian was the Indian if he had black hair and dark eyes and dark skin, and that was it. There was no other distinguishing qualities for an Indian other than that. So it was real different for me to come up here and see these people, in these galleries who were saying they're Indian artists and they were not. And it was particularly hard on them whenever you had to finally say, I have documentation that I'm an Indian, not just a letter saying I have Indian heritage. It was hard on them. Some of them were more Indian in the sense that they 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 had the they had all of the qualities of American Indian person. They had the temperament, they had the beliefs, they had they had all the strong points that you would give a Native American, more so than the others. And these ones were affected really, really strongly. It was hard for us to see some of them actually not doing the art anymore because of this act. I think it really hurt them. It really hurt them because this is this is what they started with before a lot of those other artists came on the scene.
Today, what media or medium do you prefer in painting? What do you use?
I prefer to paint in acrylic.
What other materials do you use?
I usually use ragboard, paint on ragboard, acrylic on ragboard. I like to paint on ragboard because it absorbs all the color, and then it's like a sponge. You continue to absorb color, because I usually paint in layers of color, slips and undertones. So that's why I like to use that board instead of canvas. Canvas is really hard to use slips and it's hard to make layers of paint.
How many layers do you typically do?
Typically, we'll usually probably run into. It depends on if it's a strong light or if it's a suffused light. If it's a strong light, then it's going to take at least 10, 12, 14 layers of underpainting to really be effective. If it's a suffused light, then like a cloudy day, then it doesn't take that many.
Your work has developed 3 distinct branches. Each one is different from the other, starting with your really fully developed landscapes with images of 19th century Cheyennes. Why do you like those particular landscapes? Why are they important to you?
Well, for me, it's like I'm putting the Indian back in their environment. I saw that Dorothy Dunn school, and it was blank. The environment was blank. It was nothing there, just a few rocks in front of them, and maybe some blades of grass, and maybe a bush here and there, and that was all. And that was taking the Indian out of its environment. It was saying that you have nothing, you have no land. There's no landscape behind you. It was getting the Indians kind of used to the fact that they have no land anymore. Blank canvas, just blank behind them. You have nothing now. Just a few blades of grass and a few rocks. To me, that was symbolic of that. So I used to ask my father, "Where do we live?" He said, "Oh man, we live in the most beautiful places on this planet. We lived over there in Colorado around Estes Park. It's a very, very beautiful scenic area. We live high up on the mountains. We live on the plains in the summertime towards Kansas, between Kansas and Colorado. So we have these beautiful, beautiful places to live. We lived at the Yellowstone Park. We lived at our backyards were national parks. So I really pondered that quite a bit. And then I used to look at these cowboy artists, and they were actually doing that. They were actually putting Indians in their environment, and that's what attracted me to this type of work. I wanted to put Indians back in their environment where they came from, to see them in their natural environment doing what was natural to them. So that's what I strive for.
How about your medicine paintings? How are they different in terms of your palette and the subject matter?
Medicine paintings originally started out as a tool to relax everything, to relax principles. In landscape paintings, you have to adhere to strict principles. In medicine paintings, you don't have to, because they're spiritual. their spiritual sense, you can go out of the realm of physical restrictions, and you can make it whatever you want, because these are spiritual paintings. Sort of like, you know, you let your spirit free to roam, and you do the same thing on the canvas or on the surface where you're painting. You're free to roam. You have unlimited artistic license to do whatever you want, because these are spirit paintings. You guide it by the spirit, not by the restrictions of landscapes. You're guided in that sense. So originally I started doing those to relax, and to take it easy and have a good time with what I was doing. Then we had a show at Doris Littrell's gallery where had limited supply of paintings, so we introduced these medicine paintings to that show, and they just took off like mad. People had started buying them. They really connected with these little small spiritual paintings. So that's where that spiritual painting business came from. I didn't originally intend it to be part of the market. I intended them just for me to relax. And then I was doing these different styles. I was doing this realistic style and this spiritual style, these medicine paintings. And then I was noticing that I was constantly reinventing myself. And this reinvention, to me, stems from that there are 4 seasons. There are 4 seasons in a year, and that each season, you know, is each season is kind of consistent with what our styles are. Like, you know, like we go to the realistic style, we go back to medicine painting style. That's sort of like seasons to me.
There's another vein of work that you do that's very much 50s period work. And I'm thinking about your Hawkeye paintings, among others. But can you talk a bit about the importance of that?
Well, the importance of that came from my grandfather Ober, who was a cowboy. He was an Indian, but he was a cowboy. And I would sit and listen to them talk about his experiences on the trail. That he would go on a cowboy trail drive, and different outfits that he worked for. I heard my grandmother talk about Charlie Daylight. He used to work for the Daylight Love. He rode on the Daylight Loving Trail, and then I think he rode on the Jesse Chisholm Trail. Jesse Chisholm, he rode on that trail too. But anyway, he rode on various trails, cattle trails, back then. And then they would talk about his exploits on those trails, and how when they wanted to pay him money, he would look at that money and he would say, no good. And they said, well, what do you want then? He said, point to those livestocks. Point to the stock. He wanted stock. So they would give him what he wanted, an equivalent to whatever you worked for, whatever the money came, whatever the money was. So he would get those livestocks. It was an Indian and a cowboy, and he also rode on the 101 Ranch Wild West show, and that was when it was out there in western Oklahoma, not in Ponca City. He started out there. He was coming off of one time he was coming off of a trail ride. He still had his chaps on. He still has his cowboy uniform on. Then all of a sudden he threw a vest on real quick, a beaded vest. He threw on a black silk shirt and beaded vest and threw his armbands on. And then he waited in line, still had chaps and boots on. Waited in line, a big hat too, big old 10-gallon hat. And he waited in line and waited, and then finally the man came over there and he said, that's okay, that's all right. We got enough now, everybody, go home. And then everybody started cussing in German. And that man who said that looked around and said, who said that? Who said that? Come on, who said that? Then that man turned to walk away and he cussed again in German. And the man looked at him and he said, who said, you're saying that, aren't you? He said, come over here, old man, come over here. Well, he was an old man then, but he said, come on over here. And he took him to another person over there, and that person talked fluent German, and he spoke German to Obi, and Obi replied back to him. He said, I can use you. I can use you. You can be my interpreter. Because he was a linguist. He could talk German, and then you could talk Cheyenne, you could talk Arapaho and Sioux in German, and limited English. So he started out as interpreting for that 101 ranch show. Anyway, that goes back to Hawkeye. And then where I lived in Canton, we used to have fights with these cowboys. We fought them. I told my dad, I don't like those cowboys. I just don't like those cowboys. And then he said, what for? And I said, because I just don't like cowboys. He said, what do you think you are? I said, what do you mean? He said, you ride horse, you fix fence, you do everything those cowboys do. What do you think you are? So my experiences with Hawkeye go back to those experiences. They go back and forth.
What's your creative process?
The creative process, stems from memory. It all stems from memory back then, when I was growing up years. Things that influenced me, stories I heard. We used to hide underneath a table and listen to them talk. There's some old people that were talking. They wouldn't talk freely in front of us children, but they would talk freely when we were gone, and we would hide under the table. Back then this table was huge and round, and they had a tablecloth on it that draped all the way to the bottom. And we'd hide under there, and we'd listen to them talk. And they talked, and the wheels were turning in our head, imagination, what they were talking about. We were imagining it. So over the years, that it's stored in a data bank up there, and then a lot of times when there's a strong scent or a particular event will happen, it will cost me to think about those stories or those things that we heard as children, and they filter through into paintings.
So when sometimes you'll show me a background for a painting, it'll be this empty landscape, and you'll tell me who you're going to put in there. But you'll have this entire storyline in your head, and you'll sort of know what's going to happen before the moment that we see the picture, and you'll know what's going to happen afterwards. And I guess what I'm wondering is, do you already have, when you develop the landscape, does it develop along with the story? Does the story sometimes come first, or does the story sometimes come afterwards?
No, the story comes first. The story comes first, and the landscape develops around the story, because it has to be that time frame, and it has to be that location, this particular location where this event happened. A lot of times they told us where it happened. They say, this happened in New Mexico, or this happened in Colorado. They were coming back from Montana when this happened. It happened over there in western Oklahoma by Fonda or by Woodward. So they tell us the locality of the story, and then we develop it then, and that according to the story and the location.
How important is humor in your titles and in your subject matter?
Well, humor is pretty important, because we are always portrayed as stoic Indians with a stone face, and we were never portrayed as people that laughed. But all throughout our growing up years, we were always around laughter. In the hardest of times, in the worst of conditions, these people were laughing. That humor, they saw humor in everything. They were happy people, even if they were poor and hardly had anything to eat, they were still happy.
You mainly paint Cheyenne subject matter, and you do a lot of research so that you can portray Cheyennes from that era accurately. What about other Indian artists depicting Cheyenne subject matter, or going intertribal. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was always taught to paint what you know. Paint what you know. And I see these other artists who try to paint other tribes, and they do it. They don't do it truthfully. You look at their paintings, and you see a lot of discrepancies in their paintings. If you know anything, if you know about your tribal ways, then you're going to tell right away when somebody's not painting. Their paintings are not authentic. They're not expressing what's supposed to be being portrayed there truthfully, in a truthful manner. It's off. It's off historically, and it's off. It's just off. It's not what it's supposed to be saying. In other words, the packaging's different than what you're actually looking at, and it's not a. It's not if it's a Cheyenne painting, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to say this ain't right. This ain't right because this is not Cheyenne. In order to paint another person's tribe, you have to experience it first. The first experience, you can't rely on your artistic license. You have to actually experience it. I used to paint Navajo paintings because my roommate, he taught me some of those things. He said, this is how you do it, or this is how you don't do it. He said the women had the wealth in the family and the men didn't. A lot of times the men were right first and the women were right behind them. And sometimes, in other tribes it's different, it's reversed. You have to know these kind of ways before you can actually put them down. People would look at those paintings and say, why is this here? Why is that here? You have to be able to explain it to them, or else you're not selling a product that's truthful.
How about, so you have to do the research and you have to have that kind of a background, having researched things. How about non-Indians who are painting? I'm thinking about the incident in Santa Fe, for example, when there was a painting of a Cheyenne sun dancer in the window, and it wasn't accurately done, and there were quite a few CNAs at Indian Market, and they confronted this artist. Do you want to explain a little bit what happened, how that was handled?
Well, this man who was a non-Indian, he painted this Cheyenne Sundance priest, and he painted it inaccurately. It was really, really grossly inaccurate. There was hardly anything accurate about it. Now, whenever you paint something like that, a ceremonial object like that, these things are not to be taken lightly. What these men don't realize is that you earn those rights. You earn them. You earn them through suffering. You earn them through sacrificing and suffering. You sacrifice a whole lot to go down there and to have those ways. And these men who just painted like that, this man painted this picture. He had no sacrifice. He didn't earn it. He didn't have the right. He didn't even earn the right to try to portray it like that. So we got together. Some of us went over there and we told him that he didn't have no right to paint this picture. He asked us, he said, well, I was told earlier that I portrayed everything. I was right on the money. It was perfect, just right. We told him, no, you didn't have, nothing's right on this painting. It's all off. Nothing's even correct. We told him why he wasn't correct, and we told him that he had no right to paint it. You gotta have right. You gotta have a right to paint it. Even if you was to ask permission and to paint certain phases of this ceremony, then you would actually have that much right there. But he didn't have that much. He was not supposed to paint that picture. It belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to one person. And to add insult to injury, you had $30,000 on that painting. And these people are poor people. They sacrifice quite a bit. They sacrifice a lot. And to be able to see a painting in the window and say $30,000 on it, it's overwhelming to the people, because these things do belong to the people. They don't belong to one individual. They belong to the people as a whole.
Looking back on your career, what do you think have been some really pivotal moments where you could have gone in one direction but you went in another instead?
Well, I got into playing music with various bands in high school and college, and I could have continued doing that. I could have continued playing music. I could have continued in that direction. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It was kind of like painting for me. It was a lot of personal enjoyment. It was a lot of satisfaction in doing it. But then the lifestyle is what really didn't appeal to me, and it wasn't a very healthy lifestyle. It's a lot of these people who are very talented in this music industry, for some reason they always want to party a lot, real hard, and that was the thing that you would give up in this music industry, is that you would be partying all the time. You would be living this lifestyle, and I had to weigh the lifestyle between painting and lifestyle between traveling with the band and playing with the band and abusing, chemical abuse, this alcohol, drugs. It just didn't. A lot of my family members were succumbed to alcoholism, and it would be like just going back to that. And that's not something I didn't want to do. I didn't want to do that.
Was it around 2006 when you began teaching in the Canton Alternative Education Program? Is that right?
No, it was earlier than that.
Earlier.
I think it was in the year 2000.
What do you find rewarding about that work?
Well, to work with alternative students, these students are last chance students, and they're problem students, and they're hard to work with. And that's where I was in high school. I would have been in alternative education in high school, because I was like that. I remember those teachers, whenever you were last chance students, how they used to talk down to you, and you wanted them to just talk to you like a human being. That's all. And that would have made things a lot easier. And that's how these students, you handle them over there like that. You handle them like human beings. You don't have to talk down to them. You just treat them like human beings, and they respond. They respond to you, and they're lost. They're at a junction where they don't know how to get out of, and they're trying to look for a way back. They're trying to look for a way to get back on the mainstream of high school, the high school experience. So as we paint, I paint with them hands-on. It's an accelerated formula where I do the work and they do the work. I do the work and they do the work. We do it together. We do a painting. I paint on it and they paint on it. I paint on it and they paint on it. I say, what did you do wrong here? I show them what they do wrong, and we correct it, and we work on it, and then it unfolds. It totally unfolds, and then these students, they have a new look on their face after they finish a painting. Then after we mat it and frame it and hang it on the wall, they have a marvelous sense of accomplishment in there. You notice their demeanor has changed throughout the course of the class, to where when they first sit down to a blank piece of paper, they have no idea what they're doing. They just have this disgusted look, and they're just really ready to fight. They're ready to really, what am I doing here? What are you doing here? They want to sleep. But after the program starts and we start accelerating, then they start accelerating. They wake up. And their energy level starts to raise. They get energy from this art. their energy level raised, and then they have this really, really, really marvelous sense of accomplishment that they never had before. They never ever had it before. This is the first time they ever had it, and they changed. They're different people. They're totally different people, and that's why I work these students, because it's worth it just to see their reaction when they look at the painting that they completed.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to our discussion? Something we didn't talk about that you feel is important to talk about?
Well, it's hard to it's hard to give interviews for a lot of people, especially people who are visual artists, because you know, you always feel reluctant to give. I always feel reluctant to give interviews. I just want to tell these people, you know, my words are painted. If you want to know everything about me and my background and my art, go look at those paintings. My words are painted. It's all right there. That's basically what I want to say to those people, you know. And you know, a strong point that I want to make right now is about all these ledger artists. These ledger artists are doing this ledger work because it's easy. It's easy to do, and it's popular, and it's kind of like a bandwagon thing to me. But what they don't understand is that they don't never attribute it to these Cheyenne dog soldiers who first made ledger paintings. They made the first ledger paintings with a book that they confiscated from some teamsters, and they wrote their daily happenings, important events that happened. They portrayed it in there. They wrote it in there. They made a record of it. These dog soldiers are the ones who make these ledger drawings. The first ledger drawings were made by dog soldiers. They were not made by Kiowas or Comanches or Pawnees or none of those guys. Those dog soldiers did these ledger drawings, and all over everywhere, the Southwest and the various art centers, they never attribute it to the Cheyenne dog soldiers. And that's what really, really needs to be said. They need to tell these people these things. And then whenever they found the dog soldier book, ledger book with all of their exploits in it, they looked it over real carefully. Some of those people took it to those old Indian chiefs and those surviving Indians, and they showed it to them, and they were able to say who it was, who painted it, who drew it, who did this. And they laughed and they looked and they lamented, and it brought back a lot of memories, because these dog soldiers portrayed it very, very accurately, what was happening in those books. And then after they got through looking at it, and after the researchers finally were able to get a reaction from these older Indians, they said, "What do you people think?" And the old Indian man responded to the interviewer. He said, "A picture is a rope, tight, strict, tight firmly to the stake of truth."
Well, we're going to take a look at a few of your paintings now. What's this painting called?
This painting is called Crane Woman. And this, what it portrays is that this young woman got a calling to be a healer. And a lot of times people would come forth with a call to be a healer, but it wouldn't be authentic. Was never really authentic. Sometimes it was just a passing thing. But this young woman got this call to be a healer, so she went to the principal men, the ceremony men, and relayed her message to those men. Said, "I'm going to be a healer." And then these men told her, "Well, you have to go to the four directions. You have to go to the 4 directions. Go to 4 places. Go to 4 directions and go be among 4 people. And then when you come back, you'll be a healer." Her name is Crane Woman. And then she went to the Northwest people, or the Northeast people. The Northeast people, and she told them, "I'm going to be a healer. I need something from you. So whenever the time comes and you need us, I'm going to be over here, and I'll be able to give you something to take back. I'm going to be a healer." So she lived with him for a time. And what a time means one season. She lived with him for a time, and they let her go. And she went to the Southwest people, and then she told them the same thing. And she lived with them for a time, and then she went on to the next people, and she lived with them for a time. She went to all the 4 different directions where all the 4 different people live, and they gave her something, and she went on. And then the thing was that if she went to these people and they kept her, because a lot of times in that time frame, these people used to capture women, and they wouldn't let them go. They would capture them. So her calling was authentic because she went over there, and these different people compelled to let her go. They let her go, and then she was right here. She's coming back from the people from the Southwest. As she's coming out of the New Mexico, and then going into towards Utah, towards Montana, all these cranes are following her. So her name is Crane Woman, and then whenever she gets over there, and then they keep her for a time, and these cranes will follow her back home again, and then she'll have a new name because they'll deem her to be a healer. She'll come into the camp from the east, and they'll recognize her, and they'll know that she's a healer. She's real. She's authentic.
Okay, if you want to go ahead and talk about this one.
That one's called Cradle in the Minnehaha Gulch. In this area that runs from Estes Park all the way through around Snowmass and Aspen area. It curved around, came around that way. Was called the Minnehaha Gulch, and this was a route. This was the route that the Cheyennes used to go back and forth through this area to their hunting, from their hunting wintering grounds to their hunting spring or summer grounds. They used to travel through here, and these are 2 scouts, 2 bowstring scouts, and they smelt and they seen smoke, so they went to investigate. And when they came upon this teepee, they saw this teepee, and it was a Cheyenne teepee. And it was just what it was called. It was Cradle in Minnehaha Gulch. And what they're going to tell this man is that a big storm is coming. Better hunker down. This big storm is coming. In fact, they're going to probably end up staying with him for a few days because that big storm's coming in. Going to call all his people over there, call them all in from hunting. They're going to put up another lodge, winter right there in the Minnehaha Gulch.
Okay. And what's this painting called?
This one's called Ain't Morning People, and this is one of the Hawkeye paintings. One of the Hawkeye paintings, talks about the growing up years whenever you were into staying out all night and playing cards and doing the things that you were told not to do. But also this kind of stems back to when my grandmother used to play cards with all her friends. They used to play cards late in the night. They used to play cards because there was no casinos, no bingo, none of those things. So they used to all play cards way out in the country. All the relatives used to come around, and there would be 7 or 8 old ladies around a card table, and they would all play cards till the early wee hours of the morning. And it was all a good thing. It was harmless, and there was a chance for them to visit and be with each other and talk and all that. I think it wasn't really never about money. It was more about gathering together and visiting and talking.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Merlin.